A century ago, this dog was decorated for bravery on an actual battlefield and slept in the White House under a sitting president. Today, the same general type of dog is banned outright in entire countries, surrendered to shelters by the hundreds of thousands every year, and treated by large parts of the public as a walking liability the moment it's identified by name. Insurance companies built entire policy exclusions around its name. Apartment buildings posted on banned breed lists next to wolves and exotic animals. Nothing about the dog's actual biology changed in that time. What changed was almost everything around it: how it was bred, who bred it, what it was used for, and how willing the media became to repeat a label without checking it. The story of how America's most feared breed got that reputation has very little to do with the dog itself, and almost everything to do with the last 100 years of human decisions made on top of it. First, the name that tells you where this started. Pit bull is not a single registered breed. It's an umbrella term that usually includes the American Pit Bull Terrier, the American Staffordshire Terrier, and sometimes the Staffordshire Bull Terrier and American Bully. Breeds descended from English and Irish bull and terrier dogs, originally developed for bull baiting and bear baiting. When those baiting sports were outlawed in England in 1835, the same physically capable gripping dogs were not retired. They were redirected into pit fighting, dog against dog, for gambling audiences in actual fighting pits dug into the ground, which is the literal, documented origin of the name carried into the present day. The dogs selected for that underground gambling circuit were specifically bred for two traits that had nothing to do with attacking people: a high pain tolerance and an unusual reluctance to direct aggression at the humans handling them mid-fight, since a dog willing to turn on its own handler was useless and dangerous to the very people running the pit. That specific, deliberate selection for human-directed gentleness, bred into the line for purely practical gambling reasons, is still detectable in temperament data today. Second, the version of this dog that crossed the Atlantic and quietly became an American icon. Immigrants brought bull and terrier dogs to the United States throughout the 19th century, where the breed found steady work on farms, catching and holding livestock, guarding property, and hunting wild hogs, alongside a less proud continuation of organized dog fighting in some communities. By the early 20th century, the breed had also become a genuinely beloved family dog across a wide swath of American culture, appearing in advertisements for everything from children's products to war bonds, almost always posed as a loyal, trustworthy companion rather than a threat. Theodore Roosevelt kept one in the White House. Helen Keller owned one as a companion, and a scruffy, indeterminately bred war dog named Stubby, widely described in historical accounts as a bull terrier or pit bull mix, served with American troops through the trenches of the First World War, surviving mustard gas attacks and shrapnel wounds, earning a chestful of medals and a place in military history as one of the most decorated dogs of the entire conflict. Third, the jaw myth that simply is not true. One of the most widely repeated claims about this type of dog is that its jaw locks once it bites down, a special mechanism that supposedly makes the bite impossible to release. Veterinary anatomists who have actually studied the breed's skull and jaw structure have found nothing of the kind. The jaw musculature and joint structure are essentially the same basic design found across domestic dogs generally, with no locking mechanism, no special latch, and no anatomical feature that differs meaningfully from a Labrador's jaw in terms of basic function. The myth almost certainly grew out of the breed's documented tenacity once it does bite down, a behavioral trait, not a physical one, that got mistranslated over decades of retelling into an entirely fictional piece of anatomy. A deterrent dog of almost any breed can hold a grip for an uncomfortably long time when sufficiently motivated. Only this particular breed got saddled with an invented skeletal explanation for behavior that other tenacious breeds simply get credited as stubborn rather than physically abnormal. Fourth, the bite force numbers that get repeated far more confidently than the evidence supports. Specific bite force figures for this breed circulate constantly online, often cited in the 235 to 269 pounds per square inch range, attributed vaguely to unnamed studies. Rigorous controlled bite force testing on dogs is genuinely difficult to conduct and rare in the scientific literature, and the handful of more careful measurements that do exist, including bite force testing conducted for television documentaries using calibrated equipment, found considerably lower figures than the numbers that dominate online conversation, and nothing dramatically out of line with other dog breeds of similar size and jaw structure. The headline number almost everyone has heard appears to be exaggerated well beyond what controlled measurement actually supports. Fifth, the data almost nobody brings up in the same conversation as the bite statistics. Temperament testing organizations that evaluate dogs across many breeds using standardized scenarios, including the American Temperament Test Society, have repeatedly recorded pass rates for the American Pit Bull Terrier in the mid to high 80% range, frequently matching or exceeding the pass rates recorded for breeds widely considered gentle, default family dog, including some popular companion and toy breeds that almost nobody would think to fear walking past on a sidewalk. A dog that fails a standardized temperament evaluation at a noticeably lower rate than several breeds nobody fears is difficult to square with the breed's reputation as an inherently unstable or dangerous animal, unless the reputation is being driven by something other than the dog's actual measured behavior. These results have remained fairly consistent across multiple testing cycles over the years, which makes them considerably harder to dismiss as a one-time statistical fluke than a single attack headline ever could be. Sixth, the identification problem hiding underneath almost every statistic in this conversation. Studies asking shelter staff, veterinarians, and ordinary observers to visually identify a dog's breed by sight alone, then checking those guesses against DNA testing, have found extremely high error rates, frequently misidentifying mixed-breed dogs with no pit bull ancestry at all as pit bulls, based on superficial features like a blocky head or short coat. A dog that is actually a mix of several entirely unrelated breeds can still end up labeled, recorded, and reported as a pit bull, simply because an observer glanced at its skull shape and made a snap judgment. Because so much bite and attack data historically relied on exactly this kind of visual identification rather than genetic confirmation, a meaningful share of every headline statistic blamed on this breed may actually describe a different dog entirely, miscounted by an observer working from appearance alone, with no laboratory test ever brought in to check the guess. Seventh, the part where the law got involved without waiting for better data. The United Kingdom's Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991 specifically named the Pit Bull Terrier type as one of several breeds banned outright from ownership, and numerous cities and jurisdictions across the United States and elsewhere have passed similar breed-specific legislation, restricting or banning ownership entirely, sometimes requiring existing owners to surrender, neuter, or permanently relocate dogs simply for matching a physical description, rather than for anything the individual dog had actually done. These laws were generally passed in direct response to high-profile attack stories and intense public pressure, not in response to rigorous comparative bite risk research, weighing the breed against others, and several major veterinary and animal behavior organizations have since published position statements arguing that breed-specific bans fail to reduce dog bite incidents compared to behavior-based and owner accountability approaches, since they target a physical appearance rather than the individual handling, training, and socialization history that actually predicts behavior in any dog. 8. The part where irresponsible breeding made some of the fear genuinely earned. None of this means every individual dog labeled a pit bull is automatically safe, or that genuine behavior problems never occur within the type. Decades of backyard breeding, specifically chasing a tough, intimidating image, often by people with no interest in temperament testing or responsible socialization, has produced real lines with inconsistent, sometimes genuinely unstable temperaments, the same pattern that shows up whenever any breed gets bred carelessly, for image rather than function. Dogs bred this way are frequently sold cheaply, raised with little training, and sometimes deliberately encouraged toward aggression by owners who want a dog that looks dangerous for status or protection reasons, conditions that would produce concerning behavior in almost any breed subjected to the same treatment. The breed's reputation problem and the breed's actual occasional behavior problems are not entirely separate stories. Irresponsible humans created real instances of the very danger the stereotype describes, even while the same humans' fear-based narrative wildly overstated how common that danger actually is across the breed as a whole. 9th, the part the 80-year-old photographs make hardest to ignore. Vintage photographs from the early 20th century showing this type of dog, posed gently alongside infants and small children, circulate widely online today, often labeled with the claim that the breed was historically known as a nanny dog, specifically trusted with childcare. Most breed historians find little to no verifiable historical evidence that anyone actually used that term at the time. It appears to be a modern label, created decades later specifically to counter the breed's negative press, attached retroactively to genuine old photographs that mostly just reflect how common and unremarkable the breed was in ordinary American family life before its reputation shifted. The photographs themselves are real. The catchy nickname stitched onto them generations later is the part doing more storytelling than the original photographer ever intended. 10th, the reframe worth sitting with longer than a headline allows. The dog that once wore medals through trench warfare and slept in a president's house did not rewrite its own biology sometime in the last several decades to become a national threat. What changed was the company it kept. Criminal dogfighting rings that never fully disappeared. Irresponsible breeders chasing a tough guy image with zero regard for temperament. Sensational media coverage that found this breed an irresistibly frightening headline, and a wave of legislation built more on fear than on data. The dog underneath all of that is, by the actual measured behavior of large samples of the breed, closer to the gentle family companion of a century ago than to the monster currently described on cable news, wearing a reputation built almost entirely by everyone standing around it, rather than by anything it actually did. Strip away the invented anatomy, the inflated bite force numbers, the breed identification errors, and the legislation written in a panic, and what is actually left standing is a dog whose own temperament test scores keep quietly contradicting the story written about it. The next time someone tells you this breed is simply born dangerous, ask them whether they're describing the dog or describing the 100 years of decisions other people made and then handed the dog the blame for.